We're done.
That's cool.
Hey everyone, welcome back. We are very excited to be here with representatives from Open School today. I'm going to give it just another minute to see if anyone else pops in the waiting room, and then if not, then we will just go ahead and get started here. I appreciate you all sticking around after the technical difficulties of the last session. I think we have everything figured out, and we will be uploading that video, hopefully with some captions. It's our goal to make sure everyone can have access to that. I don't see anybody else hanging out in the waiting room, so without further ado, folks, we want to get rolling.
Please forgive me, I'm figuring out some Zoom stuff, but hello everyone, how are you doing today? Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Michelle Cardenas. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I'm the principal of Open School East. And so we're really happy to be here presenting for y'all. And while I get our PowerPoint started, I'd love for my co-facilitators to also take a moment to introduce themselves.
I can go next. My name is Nawal Mustafa. I'm the associate principal at Open School East.
My name's Breen McDonald. I'm the student services manager. My pronouns are she and they.
And Ethan Thor, I'm the school social worker, and my pronouns are he, him. Oh. Can you hear me still? No? No.
You cut out, Ethan.
I said
man.
Ethan Thrower, he, him pronouns, school social worker.
And we're all here excited to work with all of you and present some of the work that we've been doing and talk a little bit about Open School East and how we've translated the work that we've been doing in the Portland area for, well, if you think about Open School org since the 1970s in the Portland metro area, but in East County particular in the building that we had since 2014. Ethan, is that correct? 2014. So without further ado, let me get this presentation open. Here we go. So we are Open School Inc., Open School East, and today we're going to think about how our participants can identify and apply specific ways or tools in which one can infuse trauma-invested and equity-centered practices within their classroom to best serve their most marginalized students. And we did the best that we could to give applicable strategies and skills that can translate in the pandemic reality that we're all facing currently. And that's a lovely picture of Tay and KK, who are two students of ours. Okay, so who is Open? If for those of you who are not familiar with our work, Open School Inc. was established in the 1970s and has been serving the Portland metro area in multiple iterations of their programming. Those of you who are Portland natives have probably heard of Open Meadow or Open School North or Open School High. And all of those iterations have culminated into the two current programs we now have. One of our programs is actually a push-in wraparound service called Step Up that serves 3 of the Portland high school communities in Franklin, Madison, and Roosevelt. And their work is using our trauma-invested, equity-centered, relationship-based model within the school structure of those high schools. And then we have OSE, Open School East, which was established in 2014, which is a nonprofit private alternative school that serves 6 different school districts: Portland, David Douglas, Reynolds, Park Rose, Gresham Barlow, and Centennial, and serves students across all of those districts in Multnomah County. So the major differences between Step Up and Open School is that Step Up is a push-in and after-school support program and has students that are identified in 8th grade using predictive analytics to help support and wrap around to prevent dropout. And an Open School East is a full-time school with all programming, all the school structures and systems that you can think of. And our students come to us after being endorsed from comprehensive districts because for a myriad of reasons did not find success in a comprehensive traditional high school setting. So today we're going to focus on what we do at Open School East in the structure of our full day program. But we highly encourage that you do check out some of the great work that's happening on our counterpart program at Step Up. So at Open School East, we all firmly believe that our students are brilliant, deserving, caring, hilarious, wanting to succeed, and are beyond the word resilient. However, they are also the most impacted by poverty. They've suffered racial bias in their traditional public school systems. They've experienced institutional marginalization, and the majority of our students have experienced multiple forms of childhood trauma. This is a fact that we've always known since the school has been serving the youth of Portland metro area for so long, but we also know that once the pandemic hit, COVID disproportionately affects communities of color and communities experiencing poverty. So we already knew that our under-resourced, marginalized community was already going to experience even more effects of the pandemic. So what could we do to build out our COVID programming or our virtual distance learning programming to ensure that the ingredients that we have seen been successful for our most marginalized students and translate that online? So some of the things that we really feel are our secret ingredients or the secret sauce is being relationship-based. We use data to drive engagement and decision-making. We have aligned practices within our instruction. We provide as many wraparound services that we can with the limitability and pockets that we have. And we also have a really robust home visit and family engagement process. So what we would like to do is talk about 3 different ways in which we've taken some of the success of our in-person programming and translated it into the pandemic area. So I'm now going to kick it off to Ms. Noel, who will now talk about just our aligned practices and our virtual classrooms.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. So we, are tasked with the same responsibility that, schools in the virtual world have, which is trying to create, schedules for students and trying to engage them despite the distance. And so we developed our daily schedule this year really based on what we saw working for us last spring. So when we were all kind of forced into the online world, we took note of when we could get kids online and when we felt like they were the most engaged. And, we try to balance that with just the need to uphold an expectation and to push our students, to perform. And we hold that high expectation, but we also know with the experience of being online with our students, a lot of them managing different roles at once. So that might be a caregiver, that might be someone who's working. We really had to think about how can we give them screen time while also managing their overwhelm and managing the other parts of their life that are now really shared space with their learning, since we don't have the opportunity to have them with us in person. So students have a daily rotating live class. They have a morning commitment, which we'll talk about that, and then they have an afternoon commitment, which is a rotating live class, as well as 4 weekly study hall options. So students have an opportunity almost every day, Tuesday through Friday, to be able to be engaged in a non-committal study hall capacity. That's not their class, but it's live access to help. And then they have that rotating live class. So they have 5 academic core classes, and each day of the week corresponds with a different class. They see their teacher live. Every teacher has drop-in hours, a few drop-in hours a day. So they have their Google Meet on, and students can just jump into that. And also, our community being small, we're very connected, and texting and calling is a pretty normal thing in our school, and email as well. We try to just, whatever means we can offer for students to connect with us, we want to make that available to them. And we also provide them with a schedule that sort of scaffolds the structure of their day for them. We know that not all of our students have the skill yet to be designing their own day in a way that's going to help them get what they need to get done. So we break up, we give them designated work time. And Michelle, you can actually hit the next slide if you wouldn't mind. So this is just an example of what students receive. So they know when their advocate call is every day. They know when they're designated to get some work done. We design a break in there for them as well. Give them another work block, and they have a separate schedule that highlights where the teachers are at any time for them, and just when their live classes are. So this is a way for us to just really try and lay it out for them, knowing that, also our parents kind of sometimes need some ideas for structure. They might be managing multiple kids in the home who are doing different programs. So we wanted to make sure we just gave this to them up front. And Michelle, you can hit again. So you saw, and I've mentioned, advocate. So our students are all of our teachers, when they become a teacher at Open School, they actually become a teacher advocate. So the model that many schools use of like having a homeroom or an advisory, we take that and sort of personalize that. Our advocate model, the advocate is really their go-to person. So the advocate is going to be, supporting the family, supporting the student, providing them with, critical information. Oftentimes that's the best person to really reach the student. So every morning we start with an advocate call, and we were able to, when we're in the building, only our teaching staff are advocates, but we really thought, I think, as the leadership team who want to be remaining connected to students, what can we do to make sure we dig our heels into the same thing as our staff? And also, how do we reduce the number of students in a group, knowing that our high need students are even higher need when we're at home and when we're, amidst a pandemic. So we decided to go from 8 advocates by making our other staff advocates. We became advocates, and now we have 13. So we were reducing our advocate group size on an average to 8 to 1. So students find themselves in a group, with 7 or 8 peers and with their advocate every day to sort of start their day and be able to support them keeping that structure. We start our day with it in hopes too that sort of with that social hour, they get up and they sort of are primed to be able to transition into working and troubleshooting for their day. We also have weekly assemblies. We do a Spirit Friday every Friday. So today was tie-dye day. So we quickly changed before this. And next week we have 2000s Day, which I mean, we all probably have thoughts on like, wow, that's a theme now, 2000s Day. So our students are, leading those ideas. We also highlight every week. Breen, does a fantastic job of tracking data. So we track every week who has attended all classes. We actually do 100. This last week, we decided there were so many students who hit 100% of attendance, 100% of their weekly attendance, that we made that the cutoff. So we raised the bar. But we reward and celebrate students who are attending all of their advocate and all of their live class as well. We also have one of our student success coordinators or student support coordinators is offering a women's affinity group as well as a Black girls affinity group. Michelle is running a Latinx affinity group. We're working with an outside organization to have a chess club, as well as it all virtual. I think the gentleman who runs it, I think he's in California. So virtual world offers, some benefits, as we've been able to connect with people, to our students, that we otherwise wouldn't. And we're also developing a student government and sort of framing that in the virtual world as well.
Thanks, Noelle. Now we're going to transition to Breen talking about how we use data as a way to center our interventions.
Cool. So when we had that sort of abrupt transition from in the building school to distance learning, it impacted our students in some pretty significant ways and our staff as well. We went from school being sort of the physical space, like we were teachers and administrators in a physical building, to sort of this amorphous idea of like, what is school? So we had to meet our students in the very specific situations where they were and really deeply get to know where our students were in order to develop not only a schedule of how to serve them, but also like our expectations for engagement and attendance, our expectations for grades, how we designed our Google Classroom, our expectations for how many home visits our advocates are doing. Really, we tried to like take an inventory of data and take our experience from the spring and over the summer develop a program that met our students where they are, and we're still continuing to take feedback and continuing to like evaluate our progress along that. Like Noel was saying, we now see that students are engaging, so we have to continually check in with our data in order to make sure that we're serving our students and helping them to succeed as best we can. So over the summer, we, after that experience of the spring where we were just sort of like doing what we could with a very limited amount of planning time that we had to then plan for this fall. And we took an inventory of our students in order to use data as a way to promote equity in distance learning. So we looked at our students' race, ethnicity, gender identity, socioeconomic status, Title X, ELL. We also looked, socioeconomic status, I see that. Mental health concerns, particularly if students have a counselor or parents have expressed that they would like to assign the student a counselor but do not have the resources to do so. Whether or not students are the primary caretaker in the home, which would impact how they participate in distance learning, any sort of medical needs that they might have at home, and credit deficiency. So taking all of that information, we learned some pretty, we learned that our students fall all over the map with these identifications. And we learned that we have more students who fall into categories that we had not considered before. We then took that data and we designed interventions that met percentages of the students that we discovered were in those categories. So one of the things that we did early in the fall was we built some partnerships with local organizations. We partner with Trillium Family Counseling, and we have a counselor on staff who can serve up to 10 students with OHP. And that's been a huge, just having that available helps us to kind of offer that as a potential intervention for our students, even though it is at a distance. We also recognize that some families were needing resources that we did not have at the time. So we're building partnerships with new organizations. We also applied for some Oregon Health Authority COVID-19 grants in order to support families who may go through some financial struggles if there was a COVID-19 diagnosis in the home, particularly relating to quarantining, loss of a job, or a family member needing to move out of the home due to a COVID-19 diagnosis. And as the fall, after we were able to build those partnerships or design those interventions, meeting the percentages of students that we had, those numbers are beginning to shift. We're seeing a lot more students who are now identified as Title X because families are moving. There's more financial hardship the longer that COVID has been going on. And so we need to continually check in on that data. And one thing that we've done for like continual check-ins is that we have a weekly meeting with myself, Noel, our associate principal, Ethan, our school social worker, our academic support coordinator, and our social emotional learning coordinator, sort of a core of an admin team. And we call that the student intervention team, the SIT team. And every week we get referrals from teachers, and we look at our engagement data that we collect weekly to identify some early interventions for students. So that shorter term, every week looking at who's engaging, what happened this week where a student was engaging consistently and then they didn't. It allows us a very clear picture of how kids are engaging with school, and we can then design some creative interventions and connect. Most of what we do at the beginning is connecting an advocate who has a relationship with a student, because we are so relationship driven. So we have that support as a weekly meeting to discuss students with social emotional learning, academic or home-based concerns. Typically our protocol is that we assign a case manager, which is one member of our SIT team. We identify and brainstorm a short cycle intervention, and we identify when we're going to discuss that intervention again. And we use data to monitor the next steps for each student. And that data consists of attendance in those live classes and assemblies and advocate engagement. And now that we're in October, we're also looking at C- to F grades. You can click on the next one, Michelle. So what data do we use to promote equity? I mentioned this just a tiny bit, but it's helpful to have a variety of engagement measures. So when we say a student is engaging in school, what do we really mean? We identified 3 different tiers of engagement. So tier 1 is what we are expecting and hoping for every student to do, attending live classes and submitting work. Tier 2 is two-way text, email, or chat with teachers. And tier 3 is parent communication, home visit, and a success plan, which is what we do with our students who are not engaging in online learning. And by differentiating the type of engagement, we can assign different numbers of points for different ways that students engage. And we can identify different interventions to help students engage in different ways. The other reason that this is really beneficial for us is that we have our upperclassmen who are working to support the family or who are watching over siblings. We have younger students who don't have parents in the home during the school day because they may be working and they don't have someone to wake them up on time. So they may miss class, but there's another way that they can get points for engagement. So we found that has helped us keep engagement, give students a differentiated amount of points, and also support different types of interventions. And the other thing is resource tracking. Ethan is our sort of resource go-to person in connecting us with local organizations. If students are not engaging, we reach out to them and inquire about things that they may need. Some of the things that we are providing to students this year are every week we distribute food boxes that have breakfast and lunch, and we actually do deliveries, which requires a lot of protocol around safety and contact tracing, but it is something that gets our students and their families fed. We provide support with paying utility bills, health clinic referrals, and transportation support. And we also have students, particularly upperclassmen, who just need to engage in their community and have some life prep. So we support them with finding community service opportunities, counseling referrals, job connections, affinity spaces, and study halls. And with grades, we are just starting this process, but students with C- to F grades have an opportunity to connect with staff in daily office hours. And one-on-one advocate calls if needed to complete their work. So data has been super helpful for us to identify where kids are, support plans to help them be successful in distance learning.
Thank you so much, Breen. And now I'm going to kick it to Ethan, our school social worker and relationship-based extraordinaire, to talk a little bit about the relationship-based part of our program.
Awesome. Thank you for the extraordinaire. I think we're collaborative on that. But I think anyone who knows our program, whether you've heard about it or it's evolved usually has played a role on it. So one of the things before I even kick off on some of the work that we're doing, I'd give props to or recognition to anyone who's ever engaged in open school, whether that's a family member or a staff member. I think we do a really good job as an organization of building up on stuff and then allowing space for new staff to take us to the next level. The part of that I'd like to speak to is relationship-based and advocacy for equity. And those are words and terms that can oftentimes get really buzzy, along with success plans and what is advocacy. And so for me, I want to lean into a few things that people can walk away with and kind of think about where they can apply things or what those things can mean for them. So for Open, when we think about advocacy, even though it was spoken about really well, Noel, I liked how you framed stuff. For us, it's not just like a homeroom or an AVIT. It really is a place for an individual student, or I put an emphasis on even family member, to be able to have a person outside of a person, knowing that many of the institutions that they come from have created a lot of trauma. And so it bridges or allows a space for students and families to stay connected to school in ways that they traditionally wouldn't, and also uniquely be heard. Some of the most creative ideas come out of our advocate space that help us cultivate our program. The relationship-based part is, take them away, baby, this COVID. The relationship-based part for me is how we talk to our families, how we work with our families, and the tools that we're teaching our students and families, and also the tools we're teaching ourselves. So relationship-based is symbiotic. We really listen to our families and students, and they listen to us too. Props. So in the same vein of learning and knowing that individuals who were learning from people, a woman named Rosa, came in and was an advocate in our program, and she implemented the pursue excellence, respect self and others, own your learning and the learning of others, participate 100%, and support, encourage, and celebrate. And the support, encourage, and celebrate even has a cultural layer to it. We just literally came from an assembly, and we're doing Jeopardy around Latinx stuff, and really taking advantage of being able to acknowledge that and the beauty that you see and joy our students have. But an advocate, these are a place where that gets to be safe to learn, and also a place where people get to learn safely. We do tons. 4-to-1 is a model that we use. It actually comes from 5-to-1. Gottman, I think, is the marriage counselor who says, the 5-to-1, but 4-to-1 is a practice around how we talk to families and students. We should have engaged at least 4 times with a family or a student before we're asking them to take a different perspective or to be open for redirection. And that's just a really relational place. It lets people know they're heard. The equity piece, we really have even gone there. You heard us say that the foundation around advocacy was broken down into smaller advocate groups during COVID. So some of these practices, if you're looking at applying them in your own program, they may take a while because there is a foundation that we've really built up on, but it doesn't mean don't be intimidated. They have to start somewhere. And the other cornerstone before we go into the next one that I really want to emphasize is part of our relational work is understanding the why of our students and families, and also being vulnerable enough to share ours. So if we can't see ourselves as equal, our students aren't interested in sympathy. They understand that we can have empathy, but nobody wants someone feeling bad for them. And they want to know that we're working on what they want or what they want for their child. And so the why for that is that, and we reach each other through our shared vulnerability. So that's just a really helpful tool that when you're working with families that can be helpful as well. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ethan. So we're going to take a little bit of time right now because we've just done a lot of talking. So we want to hear from y'all. So we're going to do some breakout rooms, and we would like to have just a quick discussion with all of us about which of these strategies resonates most with your current practice, which of these strategies may need special consideration in the COVID-19 era, or which of these strategies do you plan to apply in your own practice? And these are just guiding questions, and whatever is coming up for you, please feel free to reflect. And we'll come back together after about 5 minutes for some Q&A to get into some more nitty-gritty and ask any of us some more information about our program or our practices. So Jordan, can you set up our breakout rooms as soon as you can?
Yep, I am doing that right now.
Breen, thank you so much for putting the questions in the chat.
I almost did it, but I've been in enough meetings with Breen to know that it was coming. I was like,
I mean, yeah, you know me.
All right, here we go.
All right, see y'all in 5 minutes. Ooh, we're back early.
Oh yeah, interesting. Got 15 seconds left on the others. I don't know why you. I'm sorry.
You're good. We're just efficient.
Right, here they come.
Awesome. Hi, welcome back, everyone. I hope everyone's discussions were rich and illuminating. So we wanted to just give a little bit of time to give some Q&A or any other questions that you wanted to ask us, full group. Feel free to unmute and ask us directly, or just hop into the chat and ask us a question if you need to.
While people are thinking about their question, because I know people have one, someone's going to be brave enough to ask one. I want to give a shout out to Jason. I see him in the room. In terms of someone who's contributed to some of the work that we're talking about. So earlier when I was saying we build on other people, he was a really honorable advocate in our organization for quite a while.
Thank you, sir.
While we're thinking of some questions, how do people feel about me taking a screenshot of the Zoom for our Twitter feed? Is that all right? You can turn your cameras off if you want to, turn them on if you want to, but unless anyone objects to that, is that all right with everybody? All right, I'm gonna count down. 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Thanks, y'all.
Wildest group photo I've taken in my whole life.
Michelle, if folks don't have questions or while they're thinking of them, one thing I think might be nice is if you were to chat a little bit about what you shared with us this morning in the Restart and Rise around your advocates' feedback for cameras. It might be a good trauma-informed piece.
Yeah, so I have the privilege of having an advocate this year. As Noelle described, a lot of us took on advocates where we previously would not have, but I feel like it's been the best way to start my day with kids, which is a luxury most principals don't have. So I feel very privileged to have that. So I have this incredible group of 9 kids that have gotten very close very soon. It's just a really dynamic group of kids. And I just went out on a limb today and I asked them like, hey, so I've noticed that there's this thing going on where like no student ever around the whole country doesn't put their screen on or doesn't put their camera on. Can y'all tell me what's up with that? And they were like, oh, and I was like, is it about the background? Because you know that you can change your background or you could. And so it was just really great to hear from kids that a lot of them were like, hey, it's the pandemic. I'm in my quarantine self. I haven't had a haircut in like 8 months. I'm in my pajamas and I have zero motivation to get dressed for no one. I just don't, and I also don't feel like getting screenshotted, and I don't feel like people making fun of me. So just to understand that like that peer-to-peer teenager putting on a face, putting on appearances, the social capital that happens within the teenage life is actually exacerbated on COVID. And it's really important to keep that in mind because I've heard it from every single educator. My husband is also an educator who teaches at Fabian. And I hear it all the time. It's like, I'm speaking to the ether and I don't get to hear from kids. Just understanding that teenage part of like, what will people think of my face? And now with the technological piece of it, it's still happening and is the main reason, according to my small sliver group of kiddos.
I'd love to piggyback on that because one thing I've noticed is that I have kids who prefer to communicate with me through email, through text, through, they'll just use the chat and their video will be off. And I've found that for those kids who do not speak, I just let them not speak. And then like months in, now they're like saying a couple things. And it's nice to not like, there's no punishment of like, you're not contributing or like pressing them to contribute. But like when they do contribute, we acknowledge it and we celebrate it, just like those differentiated tiers of engagement. Like all of it is great. And it's not a detriment if you're not doing it.
Mm-hmm. A lot of my, some of my advocates were talking about some horror stories on TikTok that they've seen. And they were talking about how they saw someone recorded on TikTok of a teacher chastising them for not dressing professionally for their Zoom calls. And so I can just tell by the facial expressions that I see that everyone's like, that is just off base for so many reasons. But it's just paying attention how the concept of being trauma infested and the concept of understanding the current reality our students are facing versus what used to be the paradigm of what is academic and what is professional exists. And so the work that we're engaging in, just attending this conference right now and talking about meeting kids where they're at is revolutionary and hopefully stays beyond the COVID pandemic.
I put it in the chat, but we're trauma informed. Sometimes people just process. And so I put my email out there. I can extend mine. I'm sure many of my team, if there was specifically something that you wanted to ask another member of my team, you could reach out to myself. Our information is probably available. But if something comes up, even a tool that you're like, I want to know more about that, or I really appreciated that perspective, or if it was questions for an administrator, we're pretty open around doing this good work along with other people that are interested in it.
Thanks, y'all. Does anyone else have any final thoughts? Happy to stick around. I know we're running over just slightly here, but we've got 15 minutes until the next session. So if anyone has any final thoughts, I'll invite you to share them at this time. Again, this presentation and the chat will be available in the next couple hours. The entire summer will be available by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. That's all for me. For anyone else?
I just want to say, I think it's great everyone else has kids making noises in the background. I had to remodel my shed out in the back 40 of my yard so that I could have any peace and quiet, and they still managed to come in, and my youngest is 16. So I appreciate that other people have kids in the background.
That is the biggest pandemic reality. And congrats on your she shed.
All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much. And I will see the folks who are traveling to the next presentation at 2:45. Thanks, everybody.